Welcome to the world of professional auto detailing, problem solving. Like I say, if you don't enjoy the process, you might want to pick a different industry. So here I have a customer that wants the RX 450H removed. Pretty straightforward. He wants this replaced, but he wants it replaced because he did some damage to it. Now this is where you, can provide an alternate solution. Second, you have to do that what's called a cost-benefit analysis. How much time and effort will be involved with me to remove this? He already has a replacement emblem. It was rather inexpensive. What'd you say, Ken? 20 bucks?
20 bucks.
20 bucks. That's like a non-issue. But I know how much time, because there's double-sided tape behind this, and there's two very tiny alignment pins. And I was able to verify that because he came equipped, because he did his due diligence with the new replacement emblem. So they're just two little alignment pins. They don't really hold it on, they're just to align it. But they're still double-sided tape, and I know because there's a lot of double-sided tape, how much time and effort will be involved to clean this up completely before I can replace it with a new one. My guess is that because these scratches are what I call superficial, now I know I can't remove them with just a buffer, but I think, wet sand it and polish it and save it and retain the original emblem. I think I can do that in less amount of time, therefore charge the customer less and create a win-win. But I don't know, because every one of these emblems is different. I think it's rigid enough where I can wet sand and polish it. Unlike some of the emblems, the dome, because this is a domed emblem, they get what's called a soft type of, for lack of a better word, acrylic material. And if you try to sand it, it's just too soft. It just is not hard enough for the sandpaper to bite into it, never mind polishing it. But this appears to be, if I had to rate it, almost as hard as clear coat, which leaves me to the conclusion that suggests that I could possibly save it through wet sanding and polishing. So, and once again, Darren loves a challenge, and I look at this as a challenge. So I've got my readers on. I'm using 3000 grit, which is about as fine as you're going to get. Yes, you can find 5000, but at 5000 it's almost like construction paper. What I'm looking for is the original scratches that came down. Was it from the garage door? Very typical. I mean, it's kind of like job security in my world. So what I'm looking for is vertical scratches before I polish it. And this is where lighting and angle come in, and that's what I'm trying to do, is do that before I buff it. And you saw how long I polished or sanded. Not very long, but now the finish has been degraded in a good way because it's part of the process for the end result. Now that I've sanded it, I'm going to whip out the rotary polisher, and if you want to see what I recommend, look at the links below this video. I'm going to tape this off. It's not mandatory because it's domed, but I like risk management, meaning manage risk. Risk or accidents are unplanned events. More specifically, unplanned, unwanted events. So I'm simply going to tape off the areas that I know are vulnerable in the event of whatever. Let's say the buffer kind of gets a little crazy somehow. So I don't have to be overly precise with this tape off job. I'm just applying a little risk management, put it that way. So here's my buffer, my rotary. So once again, pretty straightforward. I know I can cut to the chase with a rotary and a wool pad in this particular case. What I'm using is my Shoal Concepts S20 Black. It is what they call their real one-step compound. So if you guys follow me, you know it is one of my go-to products. I'm a huge fan. I put just a little amount on the middle. I'm just going to finesse it at the beginning. Normally I would not be going back and forth with the buffer that quickly. What I'm trying to do is finesse the moment, because this is a different material than this. This is softer, so it will heat up differently than this will. So if I was to allow this to remain in position too long, it will heat up the plastic, and then that could cause a bad ripple effect. I'm not really worried about swirl marks in this moment. This is another risk management moment. Now, I've removed the sanding marks, I restored the gloss. I'm going to go in for a visual with my high-powered readers. These are probably I don't know, if you're an old guy like me, it's 225 maybe, 2.5. And this really allows me to scrutinize my work. And what I'm looking for is, once again, vertical scratches. And I see none. You want to have a look, Ken?
I see it right there.
Can you see one? Yeah. Oh. Check this dude out. A sense of humor. I mean, man, this guy's got who is it? Superman X-ray vision?
Yeah.
This should be like eagle eye.
Dang, that looks beautiful. That's outstanding.
I don't see anything myself.
That's outstanding.
So, right there, I know that if I was to remove this and put it back on, it would have taken more time.
Oh, absolutely.
But that would be a tough call for you guys to make if you don't have experience. Because I got a certain amount of experience, i.e. 30 plus years, I can make judgment calls like this. And I know that's oh, let's see, it's going to take me X amount of minutes to remove the emblem, to remove the double-sided tape, reposition the new emblem. Now, we've left everything completely intact as far as original equipment. Many people alone would find that very appealing. That's just going to be a case by case, a subjective call based on the customer, the person, the detailer, all players involved. So, right there, and now Ken gets to take his emblem back if he wants to, and we're done with that one. Now I'm going to move on to the more straightforward. Okay, so this, I'm only hesitating because while this is straightforward, what I'm having to deal with is we've got this chrome strip here, we've got these edges here, so it's a little more confined in a tighter area than a lot of cases. I've got this bumper. So these are all variables that I've got to take in. It's like pulling back and looking at the 10,000 foot perspective rather than the 2-inch perspective. So this is just where I'm doing the initial assessment, but it's pretty straightforward. And Ken, just to verify, I'm just removing this, correct? Nothing else.
Right.
So we're just doing removal.
I bet you that process will work on Oakley's, huh?
As far as the lenses,
It's the same polymer.
yeah.
That's polycarbonate, and so is this.
You know, it's interesting you say that because, and I'm going to do a little plug for a company called CSI, and you might find this intriguing yourself. Okay, so, for example, Clear Coat Solutions, because Ken asked, put your glass, she can change positions. And likely you were mostly kidding. He said, hey, can you do that same process with his Oakley glasses? I know that those plastics are very similar in the formulation. So if I had sandpaper, and that's where I actually would go to 5,000 grit, I probably could do it. Do I want to? Not really, because I know Oakleys aren't particularly cheap. They're rather pricey. I don't want to screw that up. So I'm gonna let Ken do what he wants with that moment. Point is this formulator, Tom Horvath, if you guys are in the Wayback Machine, he is the original formulator of System 1. He was the innovator of a one-step compound. He was perplexed because in the eyeglass industry, he knew that they could take a piece of glass, grind it down, based on the prescription strength,
Right.
polish it to perfection with one compound, one pad. He thought, why can't we do that with car paint?
Okay.
That's where he went to work and formulated the original System 1, which was a single compound that he borrowed the same ideology from the eyeglass industry. So that's a little sidebar for you guys, which is to me rather intriguing. Yeah, so I'm a big fan of his products, which is a whole nother video. So back to the problem on hand, if we want to call it that, emblem removal. Now, because this video will serve as a tutorial, but it's also to serve as a warning for the do-it-yourselfer. Many guys, if they're handy around the house, the garage or whatever, will think, and I've got videos will literally take you step by step through this. Everyone seems to be afraid of different parts of the process. Some people freak out when they see a heat gun. Some people freak out when they see the adhesive remover, whatever. The heat gun, once again, the height of awareness. This thing is industrial strength. It will blister the paint if you are not careful. I am careful. And you guys are careful too. I know you are. The problem is awareness. Because right now I'm fixated on the emblems. But what I have to be aware of is the surrounding materials. So what happens is a guy will do this and then he'll put the heat gun down and he'll feel this. Or he'll kind of do this moment. I can burn my skin in almost a split second if I'm not careful. I can singe the hairs in a split second. So if I were to put this gun and point it right at this plastic while I'm testing this, and I lose focus of this because I'm hyper-focused on that, and this heat gun is pointed at something that can be damaged, and then that's where the accident happens. So you have to be hyper-aware. It's not so much that this is, I guess it's like guns, you know? The gun isn't what kills, it's the person behind the gun and their lack of awareness, which is why you have certain rules like trigger, what do they call that term? Where you don't put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire. So right now I'm just finessing the heat. I'm checking, I'm aware of my surroundings as in where this heat is pointed at. I want to heat up the adhesive behind the emblem. Take my neon colored fishing line, and I believe this is 30-pound test. Now also, part of awareness is these emblems. They have edges to them. This is the second part of the equation. If you get hasty and this starts to lift, you can gouge the paint by lifting this emblem at such an angle like this, that this edge here will gouge into that paint. Once again, awareness. So you have to, case by case, based on the emblems, and you'll see me, I'll often wrap it around the entire thing so it lifts the emblem off more uniform in manner. I hope I articulated that clearly enough. And just as a little sidebar, you guys, clear coat, it's fragile, but the word fragile is such a, I don't know, I guess subjective term. It's relative. Something can only be large if it's next to something that's smaller in nature. That's what the law of relativity means. So if this is fragile, it's only relative to what you're comparing it with. So I can sit here and scrape it with my fingernail, and unless my fingernail has some kind of really hard edge to it, it's not going to do any damage. So a lot of you guys get really wiggy about clear coat and how fragile it is. Yes, that was an obscure reference to one of my favorite movies, Christmas, what is that, Christmas Story? What is that, Christmas Story? Mm-hmm. Fragile! Oh, look, honey, it's foreign. It says so right in the box, fragile. Anyhow, fragile. Here in America, we say it fragile. Fragile. See, that's what's called semantics. Kind of like tomato versus tomato. It's spelled the same, but people can pronounce it differently. Kind of like either versus either, neither versus neither. Somebody stop me. You'll notice that I'm peeling this off with my fingers, and it hurts. I'm just demonstrating an alternate way. Ken, what'd you say? This car's about a year and a half old? Okay, so, and his concern, which is a valid concern, is will there be a shadow left behind? At a year and a half, what you got to recognize is that, as a rule, the sun does not follow the exact side of your car. One moment, one part of it's in the sun, the next moment, another part's in the shade, vice versa. It's constantly rotating, but once it does that over a long enough period of time, the sun will eventually burn, for lack of a better word, a shadow into this paint, because the surrounding areas that were exposed to the sun will have degraded at a different rate than the paint underneath the emblem. At a year and a half, I'm pretty confident it's just a non-issue. It's kind of at the more like the 3-year mark that it becomes more of an issue. What I have is my rapid remover, and yes, you can find it under my links. Now, something like in this situation, this is where awareness comes in. If rapid remover is an adhesive remover, guess what this strip is held on with? You guessed it, adhesive. So once again, awareness, kind of like with a heat gun, is I want to be aware of where this is dripping to. I'm not going to allow it to drip in there, so I'm going to casually and carefully wipe this. And I know all you keyboard jockeys, you'll have your little commentary of like, oh, that paper towel's gonna scratch or mar the paint. Well, it could if I was not careful. And yes, this is where Darren goes into that condescending voice tone where some of you accuse me of talking to you like 3-year-olds. Well, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to that other guy on YouTube that's watching. Not you guys. It says other guys. So you also notice that I did not bust out the eraser wheel. Once again, there's more than one way. Often, well, let me clarify that. Often there's more than one way or one road home. So that's where you have to do the cost-benefit analysis for both you and the customer. As I say, and I try to teach you guys, I'm in this for the long game. And what that means is I'm not going to sacrifice long-term gains for short-term gains, because typically short-term gains are at my benefit, not my customer's benefit. So if I am at the long game, which means repeat customers, good street credibility, professionalism, those types of things, that's where the long game comes in. So I'm not even sure why I brought that up. There was a reason.
Came back.
Yeah. See, yeah, actually you're my second time that you've come to me. What was your first car? Was an Infiniti, correct?
Yeah, QX60.
Okay, so this is his second rodeo with the auto fetish experience.
Wouldn't go anywhere else.
Wouldn't go. Oh, well, thanks for that endorsement. I hope that captured that, Haley. We can use that as a little endorsement. I'm trying to stay focused on my task at hand. So I wanted to, once again, the cost-benefit analysis. How much will this process take? What will the end result be? Being mindful that, or I should say pretending like this was my car, my money, rather than me as a detailer where it's the money that's going into my pocket. You see that it's like the polar opposite of what a lot of you have been trained to think about, like, oh, profits, 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 which is kind of ironic because I preach that. It's like, if you don't remain profitable, then just go pick up a hobby. Because trust me, there's far less stressful hobbies than this. So, but I want to operate as though this was my car, my money, my time, and be conscientious of that. So I just highlighted a few things as A, I didn't have to use the eraser wheel. That's kind of a trade-off. It allowed me to not tape off the area. And it, probably as far as the time goes, is probably pretty equal. I'm just trying to illustrate that there's alternatives. You don't always just have to learn the set rule. I guess to simplify it, I'm trying to teach you guys how to think outside the box. How about that? So it's removed. I've got my readers. I'm going to go in for a visual. Okay, so with these, I can see a slight shadow, but not the kind of shadow that we need to be concerned with. It's the kind of shadow that just naturally happens whenever you put a, for example, if you've ever had a sticker on a piece of glass and you rip it off and it's invisible, but then you get it wet, you mist it with water, suddenly you see the perfect outline. Why is that? You can clean the crap out of it, but it's like that outline always remains. That's what's kind of showing. But I know that I can polish that away so that when I scrutinize it at this magnification, it is 100% gone. And that's what I want, is 100%. In fact, someone made a comment on my channel, because often I achieve, or I'm shooting for, let's say, a level 8 or level 9 of perfection with paint. He's like, well, what moron's going to hire a guy that only gets a level 8 or a level 9? And he made this comparison to like a plumber. It's like, okay, it's not a leak. It's car paint, it's subjective. So you could look at this and say, Darren, that looks perfect. Okay, but then I put on the readers, I say, okay, it looks perfect, but check this out. And you put the readers on, you're like, oh my gosh, I see that shadow.
Yeah.
So it's subjective and it's relative. Right. It's not a finite, it's a leak and the plumber fixed it 80% and now it's only leaking 20%. Right. It's such a bad comparison. Anyhow, so I'm going to address that. Now, because I know this is not going to require much polishing, I'm going to bust out my Root Bays 21. Actually, this is where you beginners that are just getting into the world of, whether you call yourself a driveway detailer, enthusiast, or up-and-coming professional detailer, and you're just learning how to buff a car. This is a Root Bays 15 millimeter. It's got a smaller throw. This is a tighter area. Now, as a rule, I default to you guys buying the bigger one, because most panels on a car are exposed and very accessible. This is an exception. So, because I have a choice, I'm going to bust out my 15 because it's just as easy as busting out my 21. Now I'm going to tape it off because I'm going to practice safe polishing, because I don't want to get polish on this vinyl trim here. And just for giggles, even though I know it's not an issue, but for you beginners, you will consider it an issue because you'll overthink the moment. It's one of those moments that you overthink the wrong things. So I'm going to tape this to protect that edge. Even though I know if I catch that edge, it's not going to burn it. It's not a rotary. It produces very little friction in the form of creating heat. I'm just going to dollop. This is a brand new pad. It's a microfiber. My Scholl's S20 black. This is the area I'm concerned with. This is the area with the shadow. Now, if you've actually endured long enough to be at this point in the video, you will notice that when I was polishing that area, I remained in the area much longer than when I was doing this. That is because it's a different material. I'm trying to, not trying to, what I'm doing is I'm responding based on what the situation presents itself. You see all this buffing pad shrapnel that gets flung everywhere? That's part of a new pad. So now, with the what's called the naked eye, I always find that an interesting term, naked eye, as if it wears clothes. Now I'm going to do what's called the aided eye. My eye is now being aided with magnification, because I know if I can nail it with this, it's going to look perfect like that. So I want to achieve perfection as close to it with this, and now I see no shadow, there's no outline. This is what I would consider perfect with the glasses. Now, what's better than perfect? I don't know. Whatever word you want to inject into that moment. So this is what I call great results. That's what I'm trying to deliver. Actually is better than great. Once again, over deliver, under promise, over deliver. Ken, you want to come apply your eagle eye?
Absolutely. I mean, if you can't, oh yeah.
Spot on. Okay, Haley, I guess, oh, did you want to add anything? I don't know what, meaning part of the goal here is to train guys of what I call the intangibles of operating a business.
Right.
So I can teach them how to do this, but how do I teach them? So that's part of what I try to do is, and as often as possible, I capture customers on, so.
And that's why I came back here, because I own a lab. My company's been in business for 39 years.
Which is why you knew about polycarbonate?
Right.
Okay.
And this is what I need, attention to detail.
Oh, okay, good.
Focus. Just don't mess up any part of the
Yeah.
car,
Yeah.
and we're good. So that's all I care about is
Okay, good.
focus.
Okay, good.
And it's a great job.
All right, well, good.
Yep.
Glad you came back.
Fantastic.